Hey designers, today I'll show you how to understand auto layouts quickly with some examples. The first thing you need to understand is directions. When you have an auto layout set, you could first make an auto layout by clicking on the plus button on the side. Then it would create a frame like so. And if you have the layouts horizontally, it would automatically set the direction horizontally. And it's the same for vertical layouts. So I would select these two layers and then make it into an auto layout. And then you see that the direction is added. What does the direction mean? So if you have more elements inside the frame or inside the auto layout, it would increase in that direction. So for this one, it is vertical. So if I try to add another text, it would add vertically. Or for this, which is set to horizontal, I could add an image and then it would add it horizontally. Next thing I want to show you is spacing. So when you have, for example, these cards, I have set them to have a 16 pixel padding for the outside. So that's the meaning of that. And for this one, it would dictate the spacing in between. So let's try this out and see what would happen. I would try to increase the padding by 24. Then you see that the outer part is increased. And what if I want to have more spacing between the elements inside? Then I would go 24 increased. Or if I want less, I would just decrease it to 8. So you could see that it is changing. So for this vertical example, the spacing is added vertically. So currently it has 16 pixels here, 16 pixels here. So now I would add it to 24 and you could see that the layout has increased. Another example with using the spacing is buttons. So if you have an icon button, and I know that this is set with some spacing in between. So let me just measure it, that it's currently 8, right? So if you want more spacing, you could go here and say 16, then it increases what's in between, or you could just reduce it to 4, which is less. Next is hug. At first, hug is a bit hard to understand, but it's quite easy. You could think hug as something from inside pushing to the outside. So for the first example, if I want to make this button correspond to the length of the text inside, I could do that with hug. So I could say larger button, and you could see that the width increases. A common example of using hug is something like chips here. So if I have different chips that have different text inside, you want them to be in different widths. So you could change them easily with that. So maybe I would change them to maybe A, B, C, and you could see that the size has changed. Another example is if you want to increase the height of maybe your frame. So I have these cards inside a little frame, which is an auto layout. If I add one more card, maybe I duplicate it. I'll duplicate this by pressing Command D. And you can see that it increased in height. So if you have maybe on a mobile layout and you add stuff inside that frame, it would automatically increase in height. So that's how you would use hug vertically most of the time. Next is fixed. Fixed is used when you want to change width or height manually. Currently, this button is set to hug contents, which means if I want to change the width, it would change depending on what's inside. But I don't want that now, so I would change it to fixed. Then I could move it around and set the width manually. Good example would be having identical button lengths like so. If you have a primary and a secondary button and you want something that would be the same width. Maybe I make it similar, but these are set to hug contents, right? So I would set them to fixed and then make them into identical widths. Maybe I want 120. You could set them easily with fixed. Let's look into fill. Fill is dictated by what's outside. it would take up as much of space that there is. So if you look at this example, the purple box is currently set to fixed, so it won't change, but this pink section is fill container. Let me show you. So I'll zoom out. I'll try to change the width of the outside layer and see that it increases depending on how the outer width is defined. So the same example goes to the card. I have a fixed image size, and then I had this text as fill container. So I could easily make it into multiple lines like so, or increase it, and you see that the text width is changing. A very good example of using fill would be mobile responsive layouts. So I have set most of these with fill, and you could see that it increases in width as I move the outer frame. Let's look at alignment. Alignment is pretty easy if you look at this box here. It would change depending on where I choose. So how do you use this in practice? Look at this card. It is top aligned, right? Maybe if I want this image to be center aligned vertically, I could change that very easily. Just go here and change the alignment. Another example is if you have a button here and you want it on the right side. You could easily change that because it's in an auto layout, and I could go to the right, then the button is on the right side. If you have also stacked elements that have different widths, you could see the change easily. You could go to the middle, so everything's middle aligned. If I go to the right, it's right aligned. The last thing you need to understand is stacked versus space between. The default of having auto layout is stacked. You need to define the space between of the elements inside. But what if you want them to be automatic? You could do that easily with space between. These and the bottom one looks pretty much identical, but it's actually different. I'll show you. Because the top one is stacked, if you try to increase in width, it doesn't change inside because it is defined with stacked. But because I have the space between defined as automatic, it would change the spacing in between. So a good example of using space between is if you have multiple icons like so in this bottom nav, and you have a responsive layout that you need to increase the width in between. Another example when I use space in between is for nav bars. I would usually have the logo on the left side, maybe a menu icon on the right. And I don't want to define something in the middle, right? So you could do that easily by having space between set, and you could change the width easily, and it sticks to the left and right. Please support the channel by liking and subscribing. I hope you now understand auto layouts with these examples. Let me know in the description if you have any questions. Then, see you next time. Bye!